All right, fine. You all can see it probably. Ugh.
Good
Live.
morning and welcome University of Redlands students, alumni, staff, and faculty. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning to participate in our 4th annual career conference. We are thrilled you're here, especially on a Saturday morning, which this is a little cold. I think it's a little warm.
I'm freezing.
We're really excited for the great lineup of speakers that are here to share their insight and their wisdom with you this morning. This event is made possible because of the great work of our team in the Office of Career and Professional Development, and I would be remiss not to thank our incredible group who made this event happen and have been working hard throughout the beginning of this year until today to make this come to fruition. So a huge thank you to our Associate Director for Strategy and Career Integration, Lauren Wooster, our Associate Director for Marketing, Communications, and Events, Thomas Gazowski, our Assistant Director for Employer and Alumni Connections, Maria Williams, and our stellar peer career educator team who has provided support as well. We wouldn't be here today without all of you and your support, so thank you. I also want to say thank you to the 30 plus alumni who are here today on a Saturday morning, chiming in from 7 different states across the US, and even one alum who is here today from Shanghai and will be calling in at 1 a.m. You can see this is a dedicated group of individuals willing to share their advice with you. So please, please, please soak that up. Ask good questions, be engaged, listen, and make great connections. Please note that this is the type of event our office loves to host to connect you with great opportunities, connections, and career conversations. If you haven't already, please be sure to sign up for alerts from our Office of Career and Professional Development website to be sure you're getting tailored content delivered to your inbox every Monday morning. And please feel free to check in with us for all of your career and professional development needs in the OCPD. We can meet with you one-on-one to discuss everything from your job and internship strategy to building your application, preparing for an interview, negotiating that final offer, or as we will hear from our keynote, making a switch in your career path. We're here and in your corner however we can support you towards your goals. Enough of me, we're going to get started. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Simi Garewal, a senior global business major who will be walking across that just a few weeks. Simi was one of our student participants in the Bulldog Endeavor program, where we match alumni who are hosting projects with our organization with a student who's interested in working on that project. This program launched in light of the pandemic when we were trying to help further support students who were seeking opportunities. Simi applied for the Bulldog Endeavor program and was matched with our keynote speaker at Don't Tell Comedy. And given her experience with the organization, we couldn't think of a better person to give the introduction and hype up our keynote speaker this morning. With that said, Simi, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, and good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to announce our keynote speaker today, Kazanjian Amory. After graduating in 2014 from the University of Redlands, he pursued a career as an accountant, but while working on the side as a stand-up comedian, he discovered his passion and quickly founded a nationwide production company named Don't Tell Comedy. Don't Tell Comedy, or DTC, showcases the best of the next generation of stand-up comedians through secret pop-up shows unique locations. What started as organizing a few comedy shows a month in California has grown to managing a large network of comics and weekly events in over 45 cities across the US. I had the opportunity to intern with Don't Tell Comedy as part of the Bulldog Endeavors program made possible by the Office of Career and Professional Development. And one of the most impactful parts of my experience with DTC was being able to see the company pivot in a time where live comedy events were simply not possible due to the 2020 lockdowns. Kyle was resilient in his pursuit to continue providing opportunities for comedians while also expanding DTC's operations. By taking risks and problem solving, Kyle has been able to innovate DTC to be efficient not only in live events, but also in virtual shows, live video production, and festivals. I am so happy to introduce a Redlands alum and founder of Don't Tell Comedy, Kazanjian Amory.
Wow. Thank you so much, Simi and Kelly. Simi, I need to hire you to explain that to my grandma because she still doesn't understand what I do for a living. And that was like the best description I've ever heard. I literally can't do better than that. Yeah, anybody, Simi, you have a job for after graduation? Simi was the best intern. She was incredible. She's smarter than I am. Hire her if you don't already have a job, but I'm sure you do.
Thank you so much. The whole point of this.
We're going to keep it casual. It's 9 a.m. on a Saturday. We're going to have some fun. Feel free to fire off in the chat. We're going to collect questions, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of the session. I'll talk a little bit about my experience. I'll talk about entrepreneurship and switching from accounting to stand-up to then starting a business. I don't do stand-up anymore, so everybody needs to lower their expectations. I'm just going to talk for a little bit. You might learn something, and then we'll ask some questions, and hopefully you get some good nuggets out of this. I guess, yeah, so I'll share my screen in a second. I have a PowerPoint that I put together to share some images, which will help kind of show you what I do for a living, much better than me just describing it. But yeah, I graduated from the University of Redlands in 2014. I studied accounting at Redlands, but I had no idea what I wanted to do when I even went to Redlands, and then switched my major like 3 different times because I still had no idea. And so for anybody who's like entering college or leaving college and doesn't know exactly what they want to do, I am here to say that I was completely in your shoes, and I didn't really quite figure out what I was interested in doing until like a few years after college. So I'm going to share my presentation. I will preface this by saying I think it's always super funny when like keynote speeches have those like corny titles, like the how to find your dream job or that stuff. So I made a couple fake titles that I'll start by sharing that do a pretty good job of describing the stuff that not everybody talks about when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I'm going to share that. All right. Present. First of all, this is a picture from one of our shows in Santa Barbara. This was one of the live tapings that we did recently. But here are the titles. Before I get into that, here are the titles to describe what I've been doing the last 5 years in starting a business. So this is a potential title for a keynote. How to start a family business by forcing your brother to work for you. My brother's in Boston, and when we expanded into Boston to start shows, I did literally force him to run the shows for me. He does love it now, so he does enjoy what he's doing now, but initially I did coerce him into working for me, which has been great. So that's one possible title. How to cram 60 chairs into a Toyota Matrix. The Toyota Matrix is on the right. On the left is a Toyota Tacoma, which we actually got 120 chairs into. You may not have known that you're going to learn this, but this is the exciting stuff. We do shows every weekend, and so we have to transport a ton of chairs because we'll do shows in like a CrossFit gym or somebody's backyard or a co-working space. And so we have to lug these chairs around. It's the bane of our existence, but very handy. I'm the Steve Jobs of packing chairs into cars. I literally found this last night at like 2 a.m. This was a fun looking back. Everybody, can sometimes focus on like the success, but it's brutal for a large portion of starting a business, getting it off the ground. When I left my accounting job, I liquidated my retirement account in order to cover the expenses of the business when we were getting it off the ground. That was super fun. There's a number for Mass Mutual if you want to try and liquidate your own retirement account. How to survive road trips with comedians. I've probably driven like 50,000 miles the last 5 years. I did a 6-month road trip where I stopped in 28 cities across the US, driving with some of my friends who are comics. Mostly they were asleep for the whole time. That is my friend Brad on the right. And then this is probably the most important one, how to purchase and return barrels at Home Depot. A lot of people don't talk about this. We're not a Netflix. We don't have the huge budgets to do these things. So what we did is for this big comedy special taping, we went to Home Depot before. We bought a ton of plants. We bought a couple barrels to set dress. On the left, you can see the barrel right over here. And then we just returned it the next day. And that's a great way to save money and put on something nice and make it look good. So those are some alt titles. Entrepreneurship's a lot of fun, but it is crazy, and you are kind of flying by the seat of your pants for a lot of the time. But that's what I love about it. You get to learn new things. You get to take risks. You get to fail, and you get to learn about Home Depot's return policies. So I'll show you a few pictures just so you can get a better sense of like what I currently do now, and then I'll take a step back and talk a little bit about my transition. But I think it actually is hard to describe what I do. Pop-up comedy shows, you kind of get a sense of what it looks like, but this is actually what it looks like. This is one of our shows in Venice, in Los Angeles. This is a show that we did. This is Playa del Rey in Los Angeles as well. We put together, some really great lineups with comedians that we think are hilarious, and organize these shows in these really unique settings. It's a way of creating a community, bringing people together. It's way more fun than going to a comedy club, in my opinion, because you can bring your own drinks. This is actually, I don't know, it doesn't matter. We had a cannabis sponsor. It's legal in California. So they were handing out free joints at a show. That was fun. Sorry, Kelly. This is in Chicago. So you kind of get the idea. This is what the shows look like. This is what I do. It all started with me testing out, putting on shows in my friends' living rooms, backyards. One of the interesting things about entrepreneurship, I'll stop sharing for a second. One of the interesting things about entrepreneurship is that you go in with an idea of what things are going to look like, and everything changes. And so keeping an open mind and being flexible is extremely important. When I started Don't Tell, I wasn't even starting it to start a business. I thought it would be an awesome way to get more involved in the comedy community. I was addressing some problems that I had already seen from doing comedy for 4 years within the comedy ecosystem of comedy clubs. And, it's too expensive. There's 2 drink minimums. How can we make this a much more enjoyable experience and bring comedy to people instead of having to drive to a specific part of town? So that I think is some of the best ideas from what I've seen come from people who are genuinely interested in a specific domain or a specific domain. And so they get really involved. Like I started volunteering at comedy shows for years. I was just checking people in at the door. I was running around bringing speaker systems to different venues and stuff. Then I met a lot of people. I started noticing, this could be done better. I don't really like this. What if we tried doing something, different? And ultimately stumbled my way into what now is a much larger thing with shows going on across the country. This weekend we have something like 18 shows going on across the U.S. So I want to leave some of the for the Q&A around like the transition from accounting to stand-up, because it's one of the most ridiculous transitions of all time. And I'll just share like one of the things that I noticed when I left college. I had been preparing to get a job in accounting. I got a job in accounting. About 9 months in, I realized, this really isn't something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I kind of hit a crossroads where I was like, I want to like do something different. This isn't something that I love. I'm not passionate about it. I'm not excited to wake up and go to work. What else could I do? And that's when I started performing stand-up. So I'd go to open mics after work. I'd go and perform in the basement of pizza shops. I'd perform in all sorts of weird locations. That's kind of what I was saying before, is by getting involved in something that I was passionate about, I was able to learn, this really is something that I love and that I want to do more with. And definitely like open to any opportunities that came my way within this world. So I met people who were producing shows. I said, hey, can I produce a show with you? Started producing shows. And after 3 or 4 years of doing comedy and producing comedy shows, I came up with the idea for Don't Tell, and kind of ran with it. And I'll get into some of the fun anecdotes around kind of starting Don't Tell, and then like some of the challenges. I'm going to share my screen again. Yes. All right. We're back to this. Chicago. Oh, this is my friend AB. AB actually went to Redlands, graduated my year. They are a comedian based in Los Angeles. Look them up. AB Farrelly. 800 shows per year. This is all the states we're in. We got digital stuff going on, but I'm kind of skipping through because I'm going to go to. This is my friend Brad performing. He's a moron. He put on this. We did a show in a diner, and he put on this smock during the show. He loves to do crowd work and riff and stuff, and so everyone loves him. But he's a maniac. Here's some. So I want to share like some of the core principles that have kind of guided the way that I think and have kind of developed as like a professional, I would say. A lot of it stems from curiosity and being interested in learning new things, and being frustrated with like the monotony of my accounting job and wanting something like more creative. So number one, these are my like 3 nuggets of advice. So I hope this is interesting or helpful. So embracing discomfort is really interesting. I would say stand-up comedy is one of the most uncomfortable things you could ever do. I remember the first set that I did, I like blacked out I just needed to do 3 minutes. I like blacked out for the first minute and a half. It was terrible. It was so bad. It was really uncomfortable, but what I've learned is that putting yourself in uncomfortable positions is a great way to grow. And when I was doing stand-up initially, one of the things that I was interested in is this sort of being okay with rejection. When you're performing on stage and people don't like a joke, performing to silence. I mean, this is, one of the most awkward experiences you can have. And I did some research on like how to kind of combat this like fear of like rejection and stuff. And I came across this concept called rejection therapy. And essentially what it was all about is rejection therapy was about putting yourself in situations that are really uncomfortable, with the like knowing that you will potentially be rejected in whatever you're doing. So I'll give an example, and this is where the Starbucks comes into play. One of the things that was on the list with rejection therapy is going into Starbucks and asking if you can have a free coffee. So I was like, really, I thought it was an awesome idea. So one day I went to Starbucks. I walked in. I was extremely nervous. I think they're going to think I'm an idiot. They're going to be like, who is this person? But I was like, there's only like 5 people in the Starbucks. Like, I'll embarrass myself in front of these 5 people. So I go up to the cash register. I order a coffee. They're like, it's $2.55 or whatever. I say, is it all right if I can have this coffee for free? And the woman was like, what? Which is the proper response. She was so confused. And I just repeated myself. I was like, is it all right if I have this coffee for free? And she was like, why? And I said, I don't know, just because. And she said, okay. It was the weirdest experience. I was totally taken aback, but she gave me a free coffee. I was feeling a little cocky. And so I was like, well, I didn't get rejected, so I feel like I should probably do this again. And so I went down the street to Haagen-Dazs to get an ice cream. And I did the same exact thing. I went and I said, is it all right if I have this ice cream for free? And the person behind the counter was like, no. I was like, yeah, that's the proper response. Yeah, I should not be getting free things everywhere I go. But what was really cool about that experience is it put me way outside my comfort zone. You almost like break down your ego a little bit in being okay with like being rejected and stuff. And for me, my interest in that was with stand-up, just building thicker skin, being okay with being rejected. But that applies to everything in life is kind of what I've found. And so putting yourself outside your comfort zone is an awesome way to learn a lot about yourself and to just become more comfortable with being yourself, which is important for stand-up, very important for stand-up. Learn how to take risks. I found this, these are like some old notes that I had written down. What's really interesting is at a high level, when I left working in accounting to do stand-up and produce shows, people in my life, my parents are very supportive, but a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, this guy's crazy. Like leaving his accounting job to do stand-up. And they weren't wrong. But what people didn't see is the kind of lead up to me making those decisions. And I think of myself as not really like a super high risk person. I do take risks, but they're often calculated risks. And so I wanted to share this experience because I think a lot of people, the stigma with like risks is like, it's all or nothing. I also did already share a slide about liquidating my retirement account, which was, everybody I think would agree that that's pretty risky. But when I realized I wasn't happy in accounting, I had started producing shows. I felt, I want to give this a go. I want to give this a proper try. And my framework for figuring out if it was a good idea to leave my job was kind of, and this is a framework that I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about taking a risk, is go over what the worst case scenario is. Like, what is the worst case for leaving your job? When I was going through this whole process, I had to think through, okay, so right now I don't like my job. I've worked in accounting for 3 years. I got my certified fraud examiner certification, which is useless to me now. But at the time, it's like, okay, on a resume that looks like something. That's 3 letters. People like letters on resumes. So I felt like, you know what? If I leave this accounting job and in 4 months, starting this company, producing shows full time, if it didn't work out, the worst case would be, oh, I just got to find another accounting job because I had the education from Redlands. I had a work experience, which was helpful. So what I realized is that, okay, so basically this thing that I'm perceiving as a huge risk, maybe I don't make money for like 4 months, or I make a little bit of money, but not a lot of money. And my savings are like depleted and it doesn't work out. That's the worst case scenario. And then everybody is like, wow, that guy tried something, it didn't work out. How embarrassing. I didn't really care about that. So to me, it was like, okay, in 4 months, if this doesn't work, I kind of gave myself a timeline around, okay, I'll do it for 4 months. If it doesn't work out, then I'll be literally where I started. So the worst case scenario was just, I'm right back where I started with probably a lot less money in my account, but I didn't have a ton of money at the time. I still don't. So these notes, I found this last night. It was funny, like looking at this, because it's 4 month. I called it my 4-month personal MBA/entrepreneurship masters, which is too many things in one title, but I didn't know anything about this. So I figured, all right, the other worst case scenario here is I spend 4 months learning all these things. I know I don't like accounting. So at the end of the 4 months, I'll have these other skills, these other experiences, which I can share in an interview for a job, for something completely different that I may or may not like. So then it became, all right, the worst case scenario is I've actually gotten myself out of working in accounting. And that's a huge win. So then it became a no-brainer. Yeah, I'm definitely got to go for this. So the 4-month personal MBA, digital marketing, SEO, which I now have hired somebody to do because I'm not an expert in that. I'm more of a generalist in everything. Social media marketing, filing a business, creating a business, production, event management. I couldn't come up with 7, apparently. I only had 6. Web design. I built the original website for Don't Tell, but I didn't know anything about it. And I'll share, like, with entrepreneurship, one of the most fun pieces of entrepreneurship is you get to learn all these different things. Like, I had no experience with web design, no experience learning how to start a business. That's another thing I'll just share is I think in college, I never thought you could do that. Like, starting a business seemed like such a foreign concept. And then what I realized is nobody knows what they're doing. Like nobody knows what they're doing. And so you just have to, like, figure stuff out as you go along. Like, I'm not like a genius. I started doing shows in my friends' backyards, and I learned how to set up a business. I learned how to market stuff on Facebook. A lot of my education that's relevant now has come from what I've learned from reading books, from reading articles, from doing courses after college. And I don't like college is, I think, is so great and important. And Redlands was a super valuable experience because I have all these skills that are just kind of in the background that help sort of frame the way that I think. And in comedy, when there's a lot of people who aren't as organized, I think that's why part of the reason why we've been successful is because I have this accounting background that I'm able to blend with this world that I'm very passionate about. Summer program, master's in comedy and producing. Yeah, so I came up with a couple of different fun names for how to leave my job. This is basically just a masterclass on how to convince your parents that you're not making a huge mistake. Learn to fail. This is the third one. Learn to fail. This is a great book that I recommend to everyone. It's called The Alchemist. This is a fun quote. There's only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, the fear of failure. There's another quote that I like that I forget where it's from, but it's something around like action kind of beats fear. Doing things, you overcome fear, but inaction, not doing stuff, fertilizes fear. I have no idea where that's from. I probably botched it, but that's what I've experienced in real life. Is I was afraid to leave my job for a while. It took me a while to do it. And then I did it. And then it became, all right, now I got to figure this out. And then the same thing applies with everything else, but learning to fail has been an important skill. And I think back to my Redlands experience. I took my senior year, I took an acting class. I'd never acted, never was like interested in drama. I grew up in Boston, so people either play sports or they do drama, and I played sports. But I wish I had done drama because it was such a fun world, and it put me again way out of my comfort zone. The acting class at Redlands was really cool. That was my first intro to doing like a monologue and kind of trying to make people laugh. I read what I looked back and I found like my final project for that. And I was like hoping that it would be something that I would want to share. And I read it and I was like, this is terrible. But that's how it starts. It was my first open mic. But that's the beautiful thing about, I think, when you graduate and you figure out what you don't want to do. I think a lot of like figuring out post-grad stuff is like process of elimination. I don't like this. I don't like this. If you try a bunch of different things, hopefully, I feel very lucky I found something I'm passionate about, but I've had friends who I think have been discouraged because they haven't found something as quickly that they're super passionate about. And that's why learning to fail is so important, because then you can try a bunch of different things and your intention is to do it and to put yourself out of your comfort zone. You don't need to be good at it. Take an improv class. You could take a writing course. You could take a cooking class. All these things put yourself out of your comfort zone and you learn a lot. And I think it's a nice kind of reframe of mind to be like, my goal is to fail. My goal is to go in there and not do something well, which is tough for me because I'm a perfectionist and I want to do everything well. But it's almost relieving in a sense. And so I've really tried to continue to do that. Even with my job now, Um, I am continually trying to find ways to take risks. I'll stop sharing now because I think that's the whole slideshow. I continually try to find ways to take risks. Like, it doesn't stop like after you take your first risk or you start a company or you ask your boss for a promotion. Like, entrepreneurship isn't the only route. You can take risks and find something you love within an organization. If you work for a company and you're not happy with your role, you can talk to your boss and say, hey, actually a little bit more interested in doing this marketing job. How would you feel about me taking on some of these responsibilities for 5 to 10 hours a week? And you don't need to pay me anymore. I'll just do the work. I want to learn this. I think people are very receptive to that. And it's something that I look for in people that I hire. We have like a couple interns every semester, and I don't care what experience they have. If they are eager to learn, they have a good attitude, and I mean, they have sort of more common sense and are not afraid to like think creatively. That's great. That's all you need. I think no employer, this is for students, I guess, no employer is going to look for you to be like a master or like even know anything. Like for most jobs, like you come in, they teach you, you figure out if it's something you like to do, and you kind of go from there. My grandfather, the one final thing, and then we'll get into the Q&A because I don't want to talk for this whole time. I could, but one final thing I'll share is my grandfather said one thing that really stuck with me when I was talking to him about, I wanted to leave my job, and he told me about his experience. He used to volunteer at this children's, I wish where I went to school when I was super young. It's called the Child Study Center in Boston. And he would volunteer and just read to kids for like an hour every week. And I asked him like why he did that, and like why, like how he did that and how he worked it out with his job. Cause he worked for the same company for like 45 years. So I was like, how'd you do that? And he was like, well, a lot of like the elementary schools like looking for male role models because there weren't a lot of male teachers. And so he's like, my friend actually dared me to do it at first. And then I really loved it. Again, he was putting himself outside his comfort zone. And he was like, yeah, I just kind of asked my job. I was like, hey, can I not work for this hour and a half in the middle of the day on a Thursday? And then I'll just work later on Friday. And the best piece of advice that he gave me, which blew my mind, even though it was so simple, is most people just don't ask. Most people don't ask the question. And people are open to lots of different alternatives, and they want to support you, hopefully, or maybe just leave that job if they don't. So I took his advice, and before I left my job full-time, again, going back to how I take calculated risks, he asked, I talked to my boss and I said, hey, I know that I'm really into this comedy stuff and I'm doing this. I'd like to dedicate more time to it. I want to find a way to make that work for the company, me working for this job. How would you feel if I reduce my schedule to 30 hours a week, and you could just pay me less? Just pay me 75% of the salary for working 75% of the time. And they said yes. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, that was all I had to do is just ask that question. And luckily I worked for a company that was supportive around that stuff. But yeah, I guess that's a fourth piece of advice that I'll just give is sometimes just ask the question. If there's something you want to do and you can share it, it's not all cut and dry. Like you need to leave your job and do this. Like there's alternatives. And even with like professors, I'm totally making stuff up and maybe somebody will get mad about this, but like, if you didn't want to write an essay or you don't want to do this, you want to create like a video project instead, I think you could always ask, hey, can I still do this work, but in a different way that's different from what everybody else is doing? And I think people will be open to it. So that's my final word before we get into the Q&A is ask the question, And don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because the worst, again, running worst case scenario, going back to kind of risk taking, the worst they can say is no. And then you're back to square one, and that's it. So you didn't regress. You're just right back where you were. I didn't know I was going to share that story, but I'm glad I did. It was good to remind myself of that. I think we'll now transition into a Q&A. There's a lot of gaps in what I talked about, like going from leaving college, not knowing what I wanted to do, to working in accounting, to then starting a company, and then having the company completely shut down during the pandemic when Simi was working. Poor Simi started working with us when we had, it's like, yeah, our whole business just stopped. It was like our whole business just shut down, but we're pivoting. And Simi was able to see, okay, we took this business. I said, how can we, translate stuff into the digital realm? We started doing a lot of corporate events. We got hired by companies like Google and Apple and Amazon, and even small companies, nonprofits. We did fundraisers, but we would get hired to create these created this whole virtual trivia experience with comedians, because I had a lot of time in my hands and we weren't running shows. And it was like, well, what can we do to keep this going, to stay alive during this time? And what's really cool, and how I like to kind of reframe things, is if you are facing adversity, I'm always like, all right, this is now true. What are we going to do now? Not dwelling on, oh no, our whole business got shut down, I'm going to go hide under the covers. It's like, no, like, this is an opportunity to do something different. How can we do that? And what's awesome for like me and my coworkers and the company is we've now built this whole private events business that's carried over past the pandemic. We're getting hit up at least a few times a month to do these, some virtual, but now people are back in person, and we're doing in-person private events. So the 2 years or year and a half that we were kind of shut down, we've leveraged that, created new ideas, new concepts, and now have like another part of our business that's a nice little add-on. And that was me transitioning into the Q&A.
And giving me time to get back in here. So thank you, Kyle. We have some questions in the chat. So first one coming in from Victor. Would you say that you may have had an advantage in taking a risk like starting a company by starting with a good financial platform in accounting? It's a good question.
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. It meant that I didn't need to really hire anybody to do the books. So I had a skill set that was relevant to the business. But I really think that the advantage I had, and it was really the unique perspective that I had going into this comedy world. So I went from accounting, started getting into stand-up, and I think a lot of people in stand-up, people that run shows, one thing I noticed, again, I was addressing problems in this ecosystem. Things weren't very well organized. There wasn't this, there weren't any really systems. If people did a backyard show, it was like they're texting their friends, they're saying, hey, you should come to this thing. But nobody could find out about these things unless you were friends with a comic or friends with somebody who knew about this secret, some sort of show. Because there's backyard, I didn't invent backyard shows. It's been around for a long time. I helped to make them more accessible and create a infrastructure. And the way that I did that is using my skill sets in kind of, I guess, business or accounting, but the whole kind of accounting mindset around like creating systems and organizing, super valuable. And that's why it's worked. Because if I didn't have that background, then it probably wouldn't have worked. Which is kind of cool, because it's like, yeah, I don't wish I hadn't studied accounting. I'm glad I studied accounting. I figured it out. It wasn't something I was interested in. Plus, this is a valuable skill set that I now still use. And again, I think school, sometimes it's like, well, how is this applicable? How am I need to know how to, calculate derivatives in the real world? It's like, yeah, well, you don't, but, critical thinking is important. And some of these things in college are are helping you to develop those skills, which you'll use, but you just won't realize it. At least that's what I tell people.
Absolutely. No, I think it's valid. And I think, a lot of times for students, it's like you have an internship and you hate it. Cool. You're going to learn a lot still from that internship. There's still a lot of valuable things that you're going to gain that you can take into the next opportunity. This kind of leads into our next question. So what specific experiences or courses from Redlands and from your time at Redlands helped prepare you to start your own business?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah.
I was reading one of the other questions.
What specific experiences or courses from Redlands helped prepare you to start your business?
That's a really good question. I mean, I feel like a bunch of different ones, including that acting class I talked about, because that piqued my interest in like kind of performing and in the arts. Yeah, I'm trying to think back to specific classes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the accounting classes were helpful. And I think that one of the biggest value adds too of college is meeting a lot of really like interesting people. And I will say that maybe even more so than the classes I took, the people that I've met and the friendships I made when I was at Redlands, those relationships have transcended like just being in college. And I would not have been able to build Don't Tell in the way that I have without a bunch of my friends at Redlands. The best example of that is there's a picture of a rooftop show that we did in like the third month of Don't Tell Comedy. And it was one of my friends from Redlands' engagement party. And so the only reason it's so hard to sell tickets when you're first starting out, like putting on shows, it's like incredible. You drag your friends to these things and people reluctantly will go and then never talk to you again. But I had like 15 of the 45 people that were at this show were Redlands people. And the picture wouldn't have looked as good. And that picture that we got from that rooftop show is a marketing photo that we've run ads with still to this day. And it's helped us sell so many tickets. But it's funny thinking back, like, oh, we wouldn't have gotten that picture and it wouldn't have looked as good if I didn't have all these friends from Redlands who came out to support. And like, I stayed on so many of my friends' couches when I've traveled around, like to San Francisco. At the beginning of Don't Tell, I would drive from LA to San Francisco, drive to Portland, drive to Seattle, chairs in the back of my car, PA system. I don't know how nobody stole it. I have a few PAs stolen over the years, but you just, luckily there's a lot of people on the West Coast from different cities that went to Redlands that I was friends with. So that was huge.
Yeah. All relationships. I think we're going to hear that a lot today from a lot of alumni, is the power of connections. Okay. Was everyone around you supportive of your career change? Did anyone doubt you? And I guess I'm going to add to Simi's question is, how did you handle that? Because I'm guessing there were some doubters. And maybe there weren't. If there weren't, then don't answer that. Added.
Everyone believed in me. I don't know. Yeah. I think probably people wouldn't say it to my face, but people were probably like, what's this guy doing? Maybe especially after they heard my comedy in the first year of doing stand-up when you're terrible. It's like, yeah, maybe don't quit your job. Maybe that's a bad idea. But I think when people started to see things pick up, maybe change their mind. But honestly, who cares is my feeling. Like that was part of my risk analysis is, okay, people are going to be like, what is this guy doing? And fine. I know that I'm not, working in accounting anymore. So I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And you ultimately, after college, you'll grow and develop. And sometimes that means it takes you away from certain friends that you had in college. And that's really hard. That's one of the hardest things, but it is important to kind of stay true to kind of your values and reflect on sort of what's important to you and make decisions that are based on that. I got really frustrated a couple years out of college because the whole vibe, I was living in like Newport Beach, and the whole vibe was work, weekends, get hammered at the bars, and you wake up the next day feeling terrible. and then you do it again. And I quickly realized, like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want, I remember saying to myself, if I'm doing this in 5 years, I'll be so disappointed in myself that this is what I've like chosen to do. And so what I did was I moved to LA to get closer to the comedy scene. I started volunteering at a lot of shows. On weekends, I would go to shows. I wouldn't go out with, friends that were still kind of in that mode. And slowly but surely, like, some people kind of faded away from my life, and that's fine. Ultimately, your friends that, like, want to support you no matter what. Like, if your friends like you just for this specific version of you that you don't even feel like is you, then screw it. Then, like, that's not a friendship that's going to last. So that was a huge realization that came after college for me.
And a good realization, I think, that probably most people eventually come to. I keep thinking as you're talking, like, you're the one ultimately that has to live with your decisions. So what decisions do you want to make about your life? Because it's you who wakes up and lives that every day. Okay. I'm going to say we have time probably for about one more question to give folks enough time to get to their first session. And good ones.
I talked for a while, huh?
Yeah. I want to say, I'm going to combine two questions here, because one I think is a fun little addition to add on. So first part of the question, any advice for overcoming stage fright? And then we want to hear your favorite comedy movie of all time.
Yeah, the look, I had I knew what I was going to talk about today, but I also didn't fully know what I was going to talk about today. And the like stage fright and stuff, the nerves of like talking in front of people, virtual is a whole other world, but I don't think it ever goes away. And most comedians would say the same thing. But the only way, and this goes back to that quote that I just threw in the chat, is like just doing it. Like, if you avoid doing something because you're afraid to do it, which is totally natural and is something I've done many times, that will only like strengthen that fear. But when it's almost like when you procrastinate doing like an assignment or a homework. Once you sit down and it's 4 a.m. and you're like, I have class in 3 hours, like you're like, all right, I actually need to focus and get this done. You'll do it. But the inaction almost feeds into that procrastination, so you're unable to do it. So just do it. Nike really nailed it. I'll say Nike really nailed it with their slogan. That's a good one. I'm also going to throw in the chat. One of the biggest things for me post college was like getting into podcasts and like reading books. I never liked reading, and then I started reading books like after college that kind of were related to like these interests in like entrepreneurship and like breaking outside the 9-to-5 and all that stuff. So I'll throw in the chat. It was more organized when I pasted it, but podcast that I really like. How I Built This is really cool. It's a podcast that this guy Raz is a great interviewer. He talks to founders of companies. Anywhere from like the founder of Instagram to the founder of Sweetgreen, and he talks to Ben and Jerry's, which is one of my favorite episodes. But it's cool hearing these stories, and it's almost like, when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you don't have that many people that you can like relate to. I have a couple of friends from Redlands actually who have done some really cool things, starting their own companies. But even just listening to these podcasts makes you feel a little bit less like alone in that world, and you hear, oh yeah, it is crazy. I'm not like doing something wrong per se. I'm just in the thick of it. And then these books are fun. The Magic of Thinking Big is a very kind of like, it's kind of a cheesy title and kind of a woo-woo type book from what I remember. I loved it. I read it a couple times. That's where that quote is from, though, the David Joseph Schwartz quote. I'm pretty sure that's actually, I don't know, but I think he's the author of that. Yeah, he was. Yeah, so that's a good one.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kyle, for your insight, your wisdom, your advice. I think, I hope folks got a lot out of that. I know I did, and appreciate as a avid book reader. I read 100 books a year, and I'm proud to say I read almost all of the books on here, but there is one that I haven't. So I will
one?
add a book to my book list. And thank you all. Please be sure to go back into the main page to click into the session. We have 4 panels coming up featuring a variety of alumni. And if you're interested in digging more into entrepreneurship, I know that's one that's coming up. So we will see you there. And I know we can't hear and see you all, but please clap for Kyle. Thank you, Kyle, so much for your time. We really appreciate you spending Saturday morning and hope you have a great show today.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Kyle.
Yeah.